to you. What a world, huh? Well,
So,
everyone, I've been talking to the Congresswoman as we have, sorry that we have opened up a little bit later than we thought. We just had an emergency meeting with all of our state leaders from all across the country, including Hawaii and Guam and Puerto Rico and Alaska. And we were joined by, and you're going to hear one of the Minnesotan representatives that we were joined by in terms of what we as a union can do to help Minnesota and to help Minnesotans who are actually standing up to tyranny and standing up to a deprivation of rights and dignity and protecting our neighbors and doing it in as peaceful a way as possible with whistles and with video and with mutual aid. That is who we are. That is the best of Americans, and that is the best of America and what they are doing. But what we also need to do, because things have really shifted since the last time we had a webinar about immigration enforcement, or what is going on right now. I'm not quite sure that it should be called enforcement. We needed to update all of the advice that we had given all of you back several months ago. Now, we've learned a lot because of what has gone on. We've learned a lot about what has gone on from ICE enforcement or Border Patrol enforcement in Texas, in at the border, in Portland, which is really not the border, in Minnesota, which is really, really, really not the border, in Chicago, and in so many other places, including now all of what is going on in terms of Minnesota. To me, and sorry for my being so direct about this is not what's happening in Minnesota. It's not about immigration. It's about intimidation. It's about trying to rewrite who we are as Americans. Now, I can wax poetic about all of the policy, but you have to deal with, on a day-to-day basis, what is happening on the ground, what is happening in hospitals, what is happening in schools, what is happening in churches, what is happening in communities, what is happening on the streets, who is being disappeared. What do we do about that? How do we deal with all of that? What is the mutual aid that we should do? What is the legal things that we should do? How do we deal with all of this? And how do we deal with out and out murders of people, American citizens, who are just trying to protect their neighbors? Renee Nicole Good and Alex Jeffrey Preddy, both of whom were killed in the action of protecting their neighbors. So I would like to take the first moment that we take here just as a moment of silence, a moment of honor. Bruce Springsteen, frankly, did it better, far better than I did, in terms of the new song that he has created just this week about this. But I'd like to take a moment to honor not only their lives, not only Renee Nicole Good's life and Alex Jeffrey Preddy's life, but all of the people who have been killed in ICE custody. Their memories are a blessing. Thank you. This is government overreach that is going on right now. And all of you who have joined us this evening, the educators, the nurses, school support staff, healthcare workers, community partners, advocates, and allies, thank you for joining us tonight. But also, more important, thank you for the work that you do every day to make all of these places places of care, places of learning, places of opportunity, places of healing, not places of fear. And ultimately, I can go through, but So can many of you, if you're joining us tonight. You have seen the unmarked vehicles. You have seen the unidentifiable officers. You have seen the people in mass. You have heard about or experienced the tear gas and the pepper spray. You have seen all of this, which is a war on the people of America, the people who live here, the people who are American citizens. It is a war on all of us. And ultimately, this, even though the US has never fully lived up to our founding ideals, what is now happening in this country is something that I never imagined would happen. We have to be a country that understands that democracy is the protection of all of our rights and a belief in freedom, fundamental freedom for all of us. But what is happening is very similar to what happens in places where there are monarchs, or there are kings, or there are dictators, or there are autocrats, or there are even worse than that. And so part of what we are all doing is we are all trying to protect each other's civil rights, due process, freedom of speech, and we are trying to protect our neighbors and their rights to be in these United States of America. And we are trying to protect all the people in America, their right to live, their right to thrive. That is who we are as school teachers. We have an obligation, by the way, as school teachers to educate every one of God's children, whether they are a citizen or not. Plyler versus Doe. We have an obligation in hospitals to protect and to actually treat everyone who comes to us. And religion has that fundamental responsibility of actually caring for our neighbor, caring for the stranger. In fact, in my religion, there are more references to caring for the neighbor and caring for the stranger in our Bible, in the Jewish Bible, than almost any other reference. But things have changed in America. Who can forget the image of 5-year-old Liam wearing a bunny hat used as bait to detain his mother? Or on the same day, 3 other students from Columbia Heights School District being detained? Who can forget the images we've seen about Renee Good being killed or Alex Preddy being killed? Children are afraid to walk to school. Families fear taking their children to a doctor, taking their children to hospitals. Families fear whether or not parents will come back. My grandparents were immigrants to this country. They saw this country as a country of promise, not a country as fear. So many immigrants who come to this country see it for promise, not as fear. Yes, we should change our immigration laws. Yes, they are broken, but this is not the way you treat anyone in the United States of America. So, in the midst of all of this, in the midst of this trauma and fear, we've seen incredible courage. Educators staying late to reassure students that they are safe. Nurses refusing to let fear keep families from care. Community leaders who accompany families to court and doctor's appointments. Parents and teachers and others who organize neighborhood watches with whistles, with cameras. The mutual aid that you see and in communities all over, and the tens of thousands of people who courageously were in Minnesota yesterday or on Friday saying no work, no school, no shopping that day, to send a message to the world that we, Americans, Minnesotans, are protecting their neighbors and protecting the way in which we want to live in a society, not with this kind of fear, but with love and respect and dignity. So we're here tonight to examine the current state of immigration enforcement, the recent policy shifts, discuss honestly how these developments are affecting students, educators, families, workers, and everyone else, and also try and share the tools, the resources, examples of what we need to do going forward, and what we've learned and what we still need to try to do. We are not going to be able to do all of it in an hour and a half. We're going to give you a taste of what is happening and what we need to do. And we will do more and more and more training across the country in response to all of this. So I thank you for being here. I thank you for your courage. I thank you for everything you do to make this nation a place where everyone can live in dignity, where what's said in the Declaration of Independence about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is there for everyone who calls America home. And with that, I want to just get to our first speaker, the indefatigable, the ubiquitous, the person who is always out there in fighting for human dignity, in fighting for workers' rights, who is a representative from the 7th District from Washington State, Pramila Jayapal. Pramila, thank you so much for being with us tonight, but more importantly, thank you for everything that you do. Thank you so much, my friend.
Randi, thank you so much for your incredible leadership, for everything that you have been doing to lead us forward in this really difficult moment. And to all the educators and allies that are on this call, thank you, thank you, thank you. I think that you are the ones that are doing the essential work on the ground of protecting our communities in this worst of times. And we see you. We really see you and appreciate you so much. And it's really important that we plan together and strategize together, because the things we're seeing at this moment, and it's in Minnesota, it was in Illinois before, in California, in Oregon. And if you haven't seen it in your state yet, you will. We have to try and make it not so. But this is a time when we need to learn from each other. And I deeply appreciate what you're doing today. It is a moment that tests all of us, our spirit, our strength, but it also brings forward the incredible power that we have to make real change. And as somebody that worked on pushing for humane immigration reform and as an immigrant rights leader for 2 decades before coming to Congress, and now for the last decade inside Congress as the ranking member of the Immigration Subcommittee, what I see is that we also have a very, very unusual opportunity right now, where the entire nation's eyes are on immigration. How did we get here? What is this broken system that we're operating within, and how do we fix it? The interest in this is like never before. And in honor of Alex Preddy, in honor of Renee Good, in honor of all the people across the country who have been subjected to the violence and the abuse of an unaccountable, lawless ICE and CBP, it is actually this moment that we have to make sure that we make change. As Randi said, this has never been about immigration. It's never been about public safety. This was never about, quote, the worst of the worst, which is what we heard being said in this administration. And I think we're seeing that so very clearly. They're locking up families, kids, people who came to this country of every single immigration status, people who have been here undocumented and never committed a crime, those who have been here on visas and refugee status and as asylees and followed every single rule. And as we've seen over and over again, green card holders and US citizens as well. Right now, across the country, a record 73,000 people are currently incarcerated every single night in immigrant prisons that have been mislabeled as immigration detention centers. 70% of them have no criminal convictions. Another 25% may have misdemeanors or minor infractions. And thousands of these people have been held without bond or any semblance of due process. People are being kidnapped and disappeared off the streets, moved thousands of miles away from their families, even before the families know that they're gone. And all of this, as we see this record number of deaths in detention, paired with the awful conditions within those immigration incarceration centers. And so none of this is okay, and we can't stand for it. It is really important to remember that the immigration system is a civil system, not a criminal system. And yet the way that immigrants are being treated today is as criminals. And the abuses of the constitutional rights, First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment of the Constitution that are being applied indiscriminately across every single person is absolutely untenable. And that's why, as ranking member of the Immigration Subcommittee, I've been hosting a series of accountability hearings, and the most recent one was in Minnesota. And we met with educators while we were on the ground. 28 members of Congress from 18 states dropped everything to come out, and within a week of Renee Good's murder, to come and hear testimony from people who were on the ground. And the stories were heartbreaking, but I'll tell you, it is exactly as Randi said. The courage that we're seeing from people who are standing up despite tremendous risk to themselves, despite the fact that people are being murdered on the streets, simply for standing up for their neighbors, simply for standing up for their constitutional rights. It has also been incredibly inspiring. And I think it's inspiring the whole country to be courageous. And that's why, for the first time in the House of Representatives, the majority of Democrats, 95%, voted against the DHS funding bill, because we didn't get the sweeping reforms that we need to see. And that bill is in front of the Senate, and we have to continue to push and use this moment to get the kinds of reforms, like you can't arrest people without warrants. You have to identify yourself. No more masked men. You got to make sure that there's due process. We have a list. And so I want to say thank you to all of you who are putting your lives on the line to protect your kids, to protect your neighbors, to protect your coworkers. And I think for people who are risking everything, this is our gratitude to Renee Good, to Alex Preddy, and to all of the other people, because there will never be justice for them, because they'll never walk through the doors of their homes again and hug their loved ones. But there can be accountability. There can be action. I've always found as an organizer that the hardest times make the strongest organizers. It's that pressure that makes a diamond. And I know that we're exhausted from the weight and the terror and the responsibility of this moment, but I also know that we will never be hopeless, we will never be powerless, and we will stand up, be creative, find new solutions, work harder than ever. And there's really no group anywhere of people that I would want to be in this fight with more than you. So thank you all so much for what you're doing, and let's go get the change that we deserve.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman, and thank you also the sharpness and strategy with which you look at virtually everything. And being on the ground in Minnesota was really, really important. And the accountability that we're all looking for. As I said, we just got off a meeting with all of our state Fed leaders and with our executive council. And there was not a dissent to us completely supporting where the Senate Democrats are in terms of attempting to delink the DHS bill from any other appropriations and get some of that accountability that we want all of it, but to get that in that bill right now. And that is the position that the AFT is taking. We're making calls to that effect tonight.
So grateful to you, Randi.
Thank you. Thank you for everything, really, and be safe. Our next speaker is Jessica Tang, who is not who I hope everyone who's on this call knows. She is a leader who lives this work every day. Jessica came with me to Minnesota to bear witness last Friday during the protests. She chairs our resistance committee, the AFT Resistance Committee. She is the president of AFT Massachusetts, and she is on our AAPI task force. She has helped shape all of our mobilization training, and she is, just in case you want any more of who she is, a Boston public schools educator and the past president of the Boston, our Boston local, the BTU. Because we have Broward, who's also a BTU, I often say we have the Boston BTU and we have the Broward BTU. But Jessica, I just really want you to, comment about what we're trying to do and how we're trying to change our training as well in terms of all the work that you have done from the beginning on about resistance and how we're trying to move things as well as just your own observations about what you're seeing.
Thanks so much, President Weingarten, and good evening or good afternoon, depending on where you are. It really is great to be here with all of you. And Facebook reminded me this morning, actually, it was exactly 1 year ago today that AFT and President Weingarten held a similar webinar, because even then we knew that there was so much we needed to do to ensure immigrant students, families, and patients were safe from the impending threats. And a year later, unfortunately, we now have over 40 people dead as a result of ICE brutality, 32 last year and 8 just this year alone. Most recently, of course, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, may they rest in power. And we've seen the horrors of children being detained and separated from family members, people detained in hospitals, outside of churches, and it's been really heartbreaking and angering to witness. However, we have also seen our communities fighting back and our members fighting back in city after city, including, of course, most recently Minnesota. We are all Minnesota and stand in solidarity with them today and every day. And I was grateful for the opportunity to bear witness to the power of community organizing last Friday. But we also know what can happen there can happen anywhere. So that's why the AFT Resistance Committee over the last year has been setting up trainings for locals everywhere. They're called MOVE trainings. That stands for Mobilize, Organize, Vote, and Empower. And we've been supporting our members in understanding the authoritarian threat, as well as what we can do to stand up for our rights, due process, and fight for a better democracy through nonviolent mass mobilization. It's about skill building and how to stand up the pillars of democracy and move them away from authoritarianism. And it's about making our democracy work better for everyone, because as President Weingarten shared, we have work to do. We can't go back to the status quo either. But it's really also about working with our community partners to create neighborhoods where everyone can live in safety with dignity and freedom. And MOVE grants are now supporting this work in locals across the country. In Massachusetts, we are actually in the midst of our third ICE surge. And a lot of people don't know that, but the first one was early last March. Over 3,000 people were detained disproportionately from Massachusetts, and we saw people kidnapped off the street, including Romeza Ozturk, a local ACLU 509 member, and even a student for one of our locals. And unfortunately, since then, we've had other students detained too. Ones with work authorizations, ones who were on their way to sports practice, who were waiting at bus stops. And we too have been fighting back, like many of the other cities that have been targeted: Los Angeles, Chicago, DC, Portland, New York City. We're all learning from each other, and we all know that everyone needs to be prepared. And so our work in Boston has been led by our Unafraid Educators Committee, which was formed in 2016 during the first Trump administration. And our members there have been actually setting up scholarship funds for years now, over $500,000 distributed to over 100 students who are undocumented so they could go to college. But they've more recently been working on setting up school safety teams at every school, coordinating with community partners and administrators. And we have locals setting up mutual aid support and meeting with city and district leaders to push for more planning and preparation. And at AFT Mass, we've been leading regular trainings on ICE verification, knowing your rights, how to set up a school safety team, and making sure our members know about all the resources available to keep our students, members, families, and communities safe. We've also set up and helped to anchor the new Mass Fight Back table, where over 100 organizations, grassroots, advocacy, labor, faith, community, come together to coordinate and build our collective power. Because we know we have more in common than not. And we know we can build the communities everyone deserves together, and we can stand up to injustice together. And so, as John Lewis said, when you see that something is not right, not fair, not just, you have a moral obligation to say something, to do something. And we all know that there is not a lot that is going right now, and that there's a lot we need to speak up about. But as President Weingarten says, not all of us can do everything, but everyone can do something. So I know that we can do this. We got to keep doing the organizing, the political education, the trainings, and AFT is leading in so many ways. And I'm so proud to be a part of our union.
Thank you so much, President Tang. Next time you're going to call me Randy instead of President Weingarten. Promise me that. But I'm really, 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 really appreciative of all the work that Jess is doing and all of this training that we know that we have to start, given what ICE has now done in Chicago and in Minnesota. These mutual aid and community watch organizations and organizing is going to become front and center as part of the training. But at the very least, and you're going to hear this from Leah Vendrasso shortly, whistles and video, and making sure if we are in the education space that we have children who are immigrants or parents who are immigrants, we need to make sure that we have some things set in practice, including what happens if we have to go to remote education, if we have memorandums of agreement on that, and including, and I'm glad you're here, Leah, because you can say it a whole lot better than I can. There's also all these checklists for a family immigration emergency plan, but really, truly, the declarations of what happens with our kids if, God forbid, a family member is taken. We need to protect our kids in every which way. At the last webinar we did on this, we said they need to have a warrant. That is true. They need to have a judicial warrant. We are in locus parentis. They cannot take a kid without a judicial warrant. However, having said that, they are so lawless, we need to do other things as well. So let me turn it over to you, Leah. You're all seeing a very cold me on Friday.
Thank you, Randy, for inviting me to be at this, and to all of you here who are in this space with us. I'm going to just share a little bit about what's been going on in St. Paul, Minneapolis. I'm the president of the St. Paul Federation of Educators in St. Paul, Minnesota. I am on release from being a middle school English teacher, so that's spend a lot of my years doing that in schools, and so being out of the classroom is a very bit different position, but all of us are working for our families and students right now. Metro Surge in Minnesota started as what they called it for the Twin Cities. That's Minneapolis and St. Paul. That started in the middle of December. There was not really a break for most of us who are educators over winter break. There wasn't much of a break. There was a lot of ICE activity during that time. It was a lot to keep track of for families. And prior to that, we had such an influx of families trying to get into our online platform school that we have in St. Paul, that we had to come up with another plan. And it just got after Renee Good was shot on January 7th, everything in St. Paul changed. It was like a switch flipped. We had to do all kinds of things in that by January 8th, we had a system set up where every school had a system set up so that they would have an internal structure for what we can do to help families. And then we had a family meeting 2 days later on a Saturday to get families and community members engaged in that same way on the external part of the side of the schools, so that we could have patrols at every school site during bus drop off and pickup. We could have food starting to get delivered. We wrote an MOU in a day, which in our district is definitely a record for having a virtual online option for families to take. So, because we couldn't handle them in the online program and they wanted to stay with their teachers or at least people from their schools. So that's what we've done. And about 22% of our students have opted into that. And that just started last week. So there are a lot of things that have changed and happened. We've got 2,300 different families that are working with us now to do this work. And that's donations, bus patrols, it's rapid response, it's patrolling around. There's so many different roles that people can take. People are driving kids to work. People are bringing food to homes. They're having to do this, come up with ways to do this so that it's not obvious to anyone, to ICE, that what's going on. And it's happening. And this has all happened since January 8th. I urge you all to think about this in your own communities, what you need to set up for yourselves to get ready. I think President Weingarten mentioned, and there was a slide that showed like how to protect our families. We call them a DOPA in Minnesota. That's a Declaration of Parental Authority. And we have 50 lawyers that have volunteered their time for free. We're actually right now in my local, while I'm in here doing this, we're running a notary class for people to become notaries, because we're going to start sending people out, notary and lawyers, to people's homes to get this done independently, so they don't have to come out of their homes to a school or someplace where they're afraid to come, because people are not leaving their homes. Literally, that is why we have to deliver food. That is why their kids are not coming to school. People are afraid to leave their homes. I am a white woman in St. Paul, and I am constantly on alert. Where is ICE? Who's that? What is that? What's going on? Are they in our parking lots? Are they by our schools? Today we had someone taken from one of our community centers, and it's connected to a school. So they were on lockdown while that was happening, and they weren't at our school, but they were at a building connected to it. And that they're creeping and they're creeping and they're creeping. And they're supposed to have a judicial warrant, but they haven't been playing by the rules for weeks now. So that is something that we have to keep in mind at all times. Does your school or does your school district have a protocol if ICE comes to a school door? We didn't just have a protocol. It's printed. We gave everyone an ID card that they could put on their lanyard that's got the rules written on it and the number to our general counsel in our district so they could call directly. We want people to be prepared. We also finally had the district finally put signs up on the doors in the buildings of the school buildings, much like in Minnesota, if you can carry a gun, and if you have a warrant to do so, or a license to do so, you can carry a gun. So lots of buildings, including our schools, have signs that say guns are not allowed in these premises. They finally put up signs that say the same thing about ICE is not allowed in these premises, which our union tried to put up last March, and they fought us on it, but they came around and realizing that we're all in this together. This work needs to get done. I think if I was to give some advice tonight about what you can do, or what should you do next, or what are some steps you could take, is think about all these things. Do you have your protocols? Do you have your DOPA clinic emergency plan set up? Do you have a process to get families engaged and a way to do mutual aid, whatever that might look like? Do you have people who know, do you know what rapid response is in your city? Do you have people who are constitutional observers trained? Who's doing that? Find out, go do those things. The best help that right now in Minnesota, I think we could get from the rest of the country, is if everybody else is rising up to do all these things and be as prepared as possible to show that they do not want this happening where they live, and they do not want this to continue, and that they are not going to stand for this no matter what state people live in. And that's my ask of everyone on this call, is to figure out what that looks like where you are and make it happen. Our educators are teaching kids all day and worrying about their families, and the families that feel safe in our city are helping everyone else. And I think that's what ICE did not count on, was that we were all going to rise up and be together and not help them do their dirty deeds. So being in community together and sticking with everybody is what is going to make us strong and win this.
Thank you so much, Leah, for also a very practical set of advice. We're getting a lot of questions. We are going to do an FAQ off the questions we're getting and off the advice that we're getting from people who are on the ground. We have learned so much from what's happening in Minnesota, both in terms of the courage of communities that are protecting our kids and doing the mutual aid, as well as the very how to deal with the lawlessness and what to do in response to that. And so we really appreciate you being here and the work and all the work that our St. Paul and our Minneapolis and frankly our members all across Minnesota are doing. But really thank you, and please thank all of our members there for the amazing, remarkable work they're doing. And I will never forget being at Art Build with you on Friday and watching all the kids making the signs to be out in force. out on the streets. Thank you so much for everything you're doing.
Thank you so much too, Randy. I appreciate all of you and everything that's happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We were supposed to have the general counsel of LULAC on the Zoom right now, but we have an even more special guest who is the national president of LULAC, which is the League of United Latin American Citizens. And I'm sorry, we're supposed to have the CEO. Now we have the national president. Roman Palomares. I hope I said your name right, Roman. I'm sorry.
That's correct. Yes. No, that's
wow.
fine.
Thank you.
Okay.
LULAC is the nation's oldest and largest Latino civil rights organization, and Roman has spent his life, his career defending civil rights, organizing communities, and building the kind of partnerships that really make change, or has made in the past change, possible. And they are our allies in much of this work. And we just want you to comment on also, you know, not only what you're seeing, but what LULAC is doing and what we can do together in terms of this, dealing with this lawlessness of immigration enforcement.
Certainly. So thank you. Good evening, everyone. And thank you, President Randi Weingarten, for your leadership and for convening this virtual meeting this evening. My name, of course, is Roman Palomares, and I am the national president of LULAC, and I am very privileged to serve alongside with our CEO, Juan Peruano, who is still circling the airport in Miami. He and I have spent the last couple of days in Minneapolis, and I got home late last night, and I'm pinch hitting for him. But tonight's discussion on immigration enforcement is critically important, not just for Latinos, but for immigrants who contribute in meaningful ways in society, in culture, and economy. Immigration enforcement has become daily reality for Latino and immigrant families and communities around the country, and for the educators and caregivers who stand with our kids when fear shows up at the schoolhouse door. Who is it? It's our teachers who are there to defend them and protect them. So the crisis is this: immigration policy and enforcement, they're no longer confined to the border, okay? They're showing up in neighborhoods and workplaces, and increasingly near places that should be safe, like schools and hospitals and houses of worship. When the federal government rolled back the protected areas guidance last year, families heard a new chilling message that nowhere is off limits now. The fallout is real and it's measurable. As of 2023, it's our understanding that about 5 million children in the United States live with at least one undocumented family member. A major study found intensified immigration raids. They have caused a 22% increase in daily student absences. And districts currently are reporting enrollment declines tied to enforcement pressure. Los Angeles Unified, for example, reported a 4% enrollment drop from 2025 to 2026, and that number is somewhere about 16,000 students that are no longer attending school. Behind every number is a child missing reading time. It could be a teenager that's missing graduation credits, a classroom losing its sense of community. No child should have to choose between learning and safety. I just spent the last 2 days in Minneapolis with Derek Johnson. He's the CEO of NAACP. He and I had a press conference yesterday. And one of the things that we did the last couple of days is that we met with community leaders, educators, faith leaders, community members, and elected officials. And I even had the opportunity to address the Minnesota chapters of the NAACP yesterday. We listened to families who are exhausted and not defeated, and who ask for one thing above all. We want our dignity, they said. Minneapolis has become the ground zero for both the pain and the power of this moment. Under Operation Metro Surge, thousands, we already know this, thousands of federal immigration agents have been deployed in the Twin Cities. Those numbers we understand as of yesterday, and talking to some of the folks at the State House there, are about 3,500 right now. The last weeks have brought grief and outrage, including the tragic loss of life during protest. And yet what we witnessed was this: peaceful, disciplined protests that is making a difference. People marched in bitter cold. When we arrived, it was -3. And of course, when we left last night, the wind was blowing and it was very chilly. But anyway, we stayed nearby the Spring Hill Suites where Mr. Bovino was at, and ICE agents were staying. And yet we had faith leaders, labor folks, civil rights organizations, and they all stood together protesting peacefully. Communities organized economic blackouts. And that nonviolent solidarity is forcing accountability. Local and state leaders have gone to court to challenge this surge, and federal officials have been pulled into meetings and investigations because communities refuse to be silent. That's the pivot from crisis to collective action, not chaos, but courage, organized, strategic, and rooted in values. And President Weingart, I want to say this from LULAC's point of view. Educators are not bystanders. Y'all, educators, your union, your folks, y'all are the frontline defenders of stability. When enforcement shadows a school, okay, it is the teachers, the counselors, and nurses who have to calm the frightened students down, answer panicked parents, and still have to keep learning going on. Because safe zones have been undermined, educators are creating shelter dismissals, new protocols almost overnight, a single trained point person to engage agents, steps to require proper judicial warrants before entry into non-public spaces, protection of student records, and very careful dismissal procedures so children are only released to verified caregivers and in some cases driven home by some teachers. LULAC's job is to turn fear into preparedness and preparedness into power. In Oregon, just recently, we conducted Know Your Rights and Rapid Response trainings that brought in hundreds of school staff and community members with more than 600 educators, and we trained them in Oregon City, in Eugene, and Bend, Oregon. We focus on what to do if ICE is reported near a campus, how to document and report safely, and how to connect families to legal support and community networks. So what do we do next? First, we deepen unity like we did yesterday. The Black and the Latino communities working together, showing up together, having these press conferences, and educating our folks there. So we want to make sure that we're working closely not only with other Latinos or Blacks or immigrants. We want to work closely with labor and faith, all of us united together, because the same machinery that targets one community today can be turned on another one tomorrow. So Derek Johnson and I stood together in Minneapolis, not just as symbolism. It's a part of a strategy that we are starting to roll out some programs, some strategies across the country. He was meeting with his chapters there yesterday, and I'm headed to Arizona tomorrow to meet with our chapters and councils there. And then Saturday, we have a big protest at one of the largest detention facilities where they're holding the 5-year-old that was recently kidnapped. Second, we want to demand guardrails and accountability. If enforcement happens, it must happen under constitutional constraints, with transparency and with respect for due process and human dignity. And we must deliver justice for Renee Nicole Good and Alex Preddy, warriors and heroes as we see them. Thirdly, we are asking for Secretary Noem, to resign immediately. She needs to quit or be impeached. She deserves nothing less after a year of gross negligence, mismanagement, and fear-mongering. We're also asking for no additional funding for DHS, and we are asking Democrats to hold firm on this vote. We defend the promise of public education. Every child, no matter where they were born, has the right to learn in safety. We want to thank you for holding this webinar tonight. We are your partners. We understand you have a plan, and we want to work with you to make sure that it's implemented. And anything that our 600,000 members and 450 councils across the country in 40 states, anything that we can do to help, we want to partner with y'all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And we are your partners in this and in so many other things. And Derek, I know, I am on the board of the NAACP, and I know that Derek met with some of our leaders as well. And it is really great to see that LULAC and NAA went to Minnesota together. Several of us were there on Friday, but it was really, really good to see you there over the weekend. We really, really appreciate everything that LULAC is doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to introduce, we're going to do two examples and then have a panel discussion on legal frameworks. We're going to go to 7:30. We know that there are a lot of questions. And one of the questions so I'm going to ask Serena and Lindy to come up as we're talking about Lindsay. I'm sorry, I don't know why I said Lindy. Lindsay, who is the statewide political organizer in Oregon, AFL-CIO, and Serena Rower, who is the president of OFNHP, and to talk about the challenges in maintaining safe access to care and healthcare, and leveraging the CEOs, the CBAs. I wish we could leverage the CEOs, the CBAs, in terms of how to do some work here. And we're going to have a higher ed example right after that as well. So what you're hearing today is kind of snippets of, what we're doing right now in Congress, what we're trying to do right now in Minnesota. You heard that from Leah. What we're trying to do right now in our workplaces. And we know that we're going to retool our training to deal with a bunch of these things that we're talking about right now, given the way in which ICE and Border Patrol has been operating. But let me, and there's many questions that have been raised. We're going to do an FAQ on all this, and we have decided over the course of the last few days how to actually make the training that Leah was talking about available in virtually every state. We talked to our state federation presidents today about all of this, and we're also going to do a very big action on March 4th about protecting our students and protecting our schools. But let me turn to Serena and Lindsay right now in terms of talking about higher education. I'm sorry, in talking about healthcare. You can tell I'm tired.
Thank you. And thank you to the AFT family for holding the space together. I'm really heartbroken that we even need webinars like this, but grateful to be doing it with leaders like Randi and Evelyn and all of you. We know we are living in a moment defined by fear and grief and urgency, and where we know that patient safety and worker safety are inseparable. Nurses cannot provide safe, ethical care when ourselves are unsafe. That makes doing something our professional responsibility, and it does not end at the bedside. When fear enters healthcare spaces, standards of care are compromised for everyone. But before I talk about what we're seeing in Oregon, I do want to honor our union sibling and fellow nurse, Alex Preddy, an ICU nurse who chose every day to care for our nation's veterans. And acknowledge that when one nurse or healthcare worker is lost to violence, the whole profession is impacted. And his death is not just a tragedy, it is an alarm. It reveals how workplace violence in healthcare is escalating in scale, severity, and consequence. And we need to be honest about what workplace violence can be. Threats and intimidation and retaliation for advocacy, armed violence, and staffing levels that endanger both workers and patients. And this is a public health crisis. Long before this administration escalated, immigrant communities already faced deep structural barriers, higher illnesses, delayed care, and limited access to preventative care. This administration has literally poured gasoline on that fire. And fear-based enforcement discourages people from seeking care. And as nurses, we know exactly what that leads to: worse outcomes, higher costs, and more suffering. That makes these issues our duty of care. The ANA Code of Ethics is clear. When human rights are violated, nurses must demand accountability. Advocacy is not optional. It is professional responsibility. And when state-sanctioned violence escalates to murder, it demands accountability from all of us. And as soon as the 5 AFT locals were informed that ICE was being deployed to Oregon, we immediately got on a call with Randi. And what we've seen since is very concerning. ICE agents have been present near and inside our healthcare facilities. The presence of armed law enforcement fundamentally changes the healthcare environment. It heightens fear, erodes trust, and negatively impacts care. Our response has been immediate and really grounded in labor strengths: education, organizing, and collective bargaining. First and foremost, patients have the right to seek and receive emergency care regardless of immigration status under federal law. And healthcare workers do not lose rights when we put on our scrubs. That's why we focused on education and making clear, accessible guidance available. We refuse to let fear override law and our values. Just this month, they came to Oregon in our facilities. At Adventist Health, a mother and father brought their 7-year-old child to urgent care. And instead of safety and care, the whole family was detained and sent to Texas. No parent should ever have to face the decision between care and detainment. And at Legacy Health, members have had to deal with ICE agents standing at the bedside during exams, listening to private provider conversations, and hovering while nurses assisted patients to the bathroom. And even more disturbing is that hospital leadership has failed to protect them. Nurses were told, "Oh, ask nicely." And if ICE didn't comply, to just go on and step aside. This is unacceptable. It's not normal, and we won't stand for it. And I am just so proud of how our ONA siblings spoke publicly out against Legacy's despicable behavior and demanded accountability. And we know we need to just keep doing what we've always done. We organize with solidarity, speed, and structure to prevent harm and not just respond after it occurs. We lean into one-on-one conversations, even when they're hard, because understanding builds power. And we don't need perfect alignment to act on our shared values. And across Oregon, AFT locals are coordinating de-escalation and medical response trainings, sharing information rapidly, taking visible collective action at No Kings and other marches, engaging elected officials regularly, lifting up worker and patient stories, and organizing the bosses. We all know that contract language is power. So we are pushing our employers to clearly define private patient care spaces, provide Know Your Rights educations at new employee orientation, train staff on law enforcement encounters, and prohibit retaliation against workers who assert their rights. At Kaiser, we just bargained badge buddies with step-by-step guidance for engaging law enforcement, along with stronger hiring protections and job security if a worker is detained. Is it everything? No. But contract language is a way to turn ethical responsibility into enforceable obligation. And I can share some of those sample languages with the organizer of this webinar afterwards. But I'll just go back to where I began, by honoring Alex and all of those that we've lost, to remind us that we can honor them by protecting the living, defending our patients, and insisting that healthcare remains a place of healing and not fear. And we know none of this happens alone or just in the workplace. We know that this work also must be deeply rooted in community. And in Oregon, we've built strong partnerships, and in just a moment, Lindsay will share what that looks like in practice for us in Oregon. And I'll just end here. We must organize now to protect our communities today, but there's a long game, right? And we know we must turn out our members in November to vote to protect them tomorrow. Thank you. Lindsay?
Thank you, Serena. The story of that family breaks my heart, and I am very proud to be with you here today, representing Oregon. I'm Lindsay Sadlu. I use she, they pronouns. I'm a political organizer with the Oregon AFL-CIO, the State Labor Federation. I'm based in Portland, Oregon, first generation Iranian American family. Sending love to all my SWANA siblings in the call right now. We're going through it. Oregon AFL-CIO is resolved in our duty to serve as a hub for coordinating and mobilizing Oregon labor's response to the relentless attacks and federal aggression focused on working families in our state and around our country. The Oregon AFL-CIO sits at two key coalition tables that I want to share a little bit about. One is called Protect Oregon, and we're focused on defending our state against authoritarianism. And the second is Oregon for All, focused on organizing for Oregonians who are immigrants. So starting a little bit with the Protect Oregon space, this is a coalition made up of labor unions and community-based organizations like our Rural Organizing Project, the ACLU of Oregon, and the Oregon Food Bank. Protect Oregon was poised to act when Trump made Portland the target of a national federalization and deployment, a National Guard deployment. We consistently amplified messaging that Oregon is home and we do not need or want a military takeover of our city. And fortunately, thanks in large part to our state attorney general, Dan Rayfield, and our district court judge, Karen Immergut, we staved off that National Guard deployment. And we took a strong stance against the Trump administration's baseless aggression. In October, on the 15th, we hosted and helped conduct a training on nonviolent non-cooperation organized by AFT and facilitated by the legendary activist Lisa Fithian. We joined about 20 AFT Oregon members in learning and building this muscle memory around how to stand up and work together to defend our community members in the face of ICE and law enforcement. Very tactical, very embodied training. So really appreciate AFT for that. A little bit later on October 18th, we were part of the No Kings National Day of Action, and Oregon AFL-CIO helped coordinate the Neighbors and Labor Rally in Portland and marches across the state that drew thousands of working people and activists to the street. And we'll be keeping on with that this Saturday, joining the National Day of Action in honor of the folks who have been killed, not just the ones most recently, but the numerous people that have been killed by ICE and who are calling for its abolition. And I want to add that this isn't just about ICE, this is about all arms of the state, like police, the US military, and the US prison system that are designed to surveil, disenfranchise, and kill with impunity. And on that note, talking more about immigrant justice focus, I want to talk about the Oregon for All table. This is a coalition in Oregon led primarily by BIPOC community-based organizations. And it includes a handful of labor unions. I'm proud to represent the AFL-CIO in that space. We really are focusing on the need for a rapid response network. And Leah, I hear you, and have been really taking notes from leadership across the country that have been mobilizing this rapid response and mutual aid network to defend against ICE raids and deportation. So the Oregon for All Coalition table has been working towards two goals, building a base of leaders across urban and rural Oregon and building our collective power through relationships with one another to build this infrastructure. So with the understanding that we must achieve this meaningful scale of 3.5% of the population to halt a backslide into authoritarianism. We've narrowed our organizing goals to move 60% of Oregon's counties up a ladder of support for immigrant justice. So what this means, what is this ladder of support? It's policy solutions that counties and cities can move from the bottom rung of affirming sanctuary state status or sanctuary city status to things like declaring a state of emergency to move funds from the city or county to impacted people, all the way to banning surveillance tools like flock cameras that are cropping up around our cities, and even leaders using strategic, nonviolent, non-cooperation to get ICE out of our cities. And we also want to engage 1,000 people in this fight. So tactics like attending anti-authoritarianism trainings to lobbying our elected leaders in counties and cities to move these policies forward. So that is just a sampling platter of the people-powered work that we're doing here in Oregon. And again, just thank you and solidarity to all who are doing this work across the country. And I'll pass it back to you, Randi. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now I don't want to run out of time because we have two more presentations, and we're trying to answer the questions, and we're gonna in the chat. I don't know why I don't have the chat in my but I'm getting it on emails. So what I want to do, because we promised we would end at 7:30, is I want to see if we can do have Andrea and Dan Coates come on right now, and then have Jonathan come on afterwards. And then I'll see where we are in terms of whether or not we can answer some questions verbally or just do them in terms of an FAQ afterwards. There's so much information. There's so much we have to get out to you. We think we have a stripped down version of what a volunteer patrol protocol could look like, that I'm just going back and forth with a couple of people about whether or not we can put it on the webinar right now. We're suggesting, we're thinking that we can, but I want just Andrea, Andrea, you've been through so many different fights in so many different ways, but you have really led the PSC safe passage and court accompaniment work. And Daniel, you've done something similar in terms of from Make the Road. So why don't you two take it away in terms of what you have done? And I understand from some other texts that I'm getting today that the vigil that's going to go on in New York tomorrow night is starting to be very, very, very big. Thank you for all the work that you have done this whole very, very long year, Andrea. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Randi, for all that you've done and for inviting us here tonight. I thought I would explain what our medium-sized union has done over the course of the past year, and then you will hear from Daniel, one of our partners in crime here from Make the Road New York, because this year is really a year of coalition building, and it's all about building partnerships and relationships. So I'm going to go through some slides and talk about what the Professional Staff Congress at the City University did. Daniel is looking a little perplexed. Is everyone hearing me? Is this going okay? Okay, great. So, and I think I can forward my own slides. Let's see. There we go. So we're a social justice union representing 30,000. Why is it going so fast? That's no good. Okay. We're a social justice union. Can we, let me see. I don't know why that. Wow, this is tricky. Okay. There we are. Okay, so this was our goals. This is how we started.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. This is who we are as a union, and these were our original objectives. As you will remember, the attacks on immigrants and the attacks on higher ed were prime targets of this Trump administration right in January. It became perfectly clear. And our students at the City University of New York are 37% immigrant students, and many more from mixed status families. Many thousands of our students are undocumented. So on day one, we immediately worried about our students and worried about our spaces, worried about our campuses. And we started had a steering committee and started getting this word out that these are still your spaces, these are still your institutions, these are still your schools, and you're safe here. So that was our first message. We were very afraid that ICE would appear on our campuses at this early date. We immediately formed a working group. We announced to members that we wanted to, deal with this issue, mostly worried about our students, but also many of our members. And like so many people across the country, we're not an immigration group, right? We're a union, labor union. We had just finished ratifying a contract that we spent 2 years negotiating. And here we were with the Trump administration going after us and so many others. So we had to catch up. We learned, we did the Know Your Rights trainings and rapid response trainings. And, the AFT was fabulous with providing really good resources repeatedly. So that was really important. And after not too long, we all were out in the streets, and that was important. And, it took a minute. I think there was a lot of shock when the administration first came on the scene and how quickly they ruthlessly went after immigrant families and our neighbors. We had an early victory. We were lucky because we have one of our colleges is John Jay College, and they have an annual jobs fair. And students there told us that ICE and DHS were at the jobs fair. And in 2 days, students organized the union and they organized students. And we showed up and we made so much noise outside of the college that when they were scheduled to return 2 days later, they did not return. We returned and they did not. So that was encouraging that, we felt like, we can make a difference by being out in the streets. We then, knew that we had to push our college administration, our university administration to do more. So we had a petition campaign, and that yielded, thousands, as you can see, thousands and thousands of signatures, and broadened our reach in the university among students and among our members. Then you remember the attacks on students came, and immigrants came by way of the visas, revocation of visas. So again, we were involved in that struggle. And then in the middle of May, we entered this really horrible period with ICE appearing in the courts, like less than a half a mile from our union offices. We immediately thought this is something that was very upsetting, obviously. It threatened so many New Yorkers. And we wrote to members, and they immediately stepped up and said, yes, this is something we want and need to respond to. So we began running trainings for our members and going into the courts. And this was also a time for we're not an immigration organization, right? So we reached out to other organizations and learned what we needed to know to do this work in the courts. And many of our own members had been involved in court watch activities before. So that was great. This is what we saw. We brought members into the courts. These are federal buildings, federal courthouses. We saw ICE in the hallways, ICE intimidating and harassing families, our neighbors. We knew that some of these were our students and our students' families. And this work was not for everybody. We did individual training for every member who wanted to do this work. And for people who felt they could and should do this, we did trainings, and we went every single week. And since mid-May, we have gone every single week into the courthouses, walking through these horrible hallways with vulnerable families. This is kind of what we did. We went to the courthouses. It was our right, our legal right to bear witness, to be in the courts, and that's what we did. We brought information in multiple languages. We got information back that would help someone if they were detained or even if they were not detained. We would pass along this information to social workers and other groups who did a lot of follow-up work with everyone we made contact with. But we felt that no matter how unwelcomed we were in the courts, it was our right and our obligation, and we felt responsible for being there. And we felt that it was an honor that families wanted to talk to us and accepted our support. So that was, we continued to do this. This is the kind of scene it became in the courts. it was lawlessness, right? We were following every rule, and ICE and those who worked in the building made their own rules, and those rules changed every day, and we never knew what to expect. And it became really, really awful. We witnessed horrible things in the courts, and yet we continued to appear, and we continued to try to adjust to whatever horrendous things ICE was pulling from one week to the next, and be able to make connections to families and escort them out, and hopefully be able to escort them out, and they were, if they were not taken. And we came in to try to also just bring some joy into the moment, believe it or not. There are many children who go to the courts and they're dressed in their Sunday best, and it's heartbreaking to think that this is probably one of the worst days of their lives. And we come with books. And this happened because one of our members, independently, a librarian, called the publisher and had a publisher contribute all these books to us. So suddenly we had all these books, and it would just brighten up a family for a moment to have books and toys that people brought. You know, we kept demonstrating, and I know Daniel will talk a little bit more about this. People really woke up, and all, whether it was from a legal perspective or a court watch perspective or a student's perspective or communities, but everyone was in the streets, and it's just not stopped. So this is a little summary of what we've done in the courts. We've trained hundreds of members. Over the past 8 months, more than 200 members have done this court watch activity. I mean, not every week, but sometimes. Some have done it many times. We've actually made more than 760 discrete visits to the courts, talking to hundreds and hundreds of families, and some of them are our students, and we also arrange to accompany and support our students. Importantly for us is most of these people who did this work were not our activists, our veteran activists in the union. They were people who were good union members, but they had never done anything with the union. But this issue called people, it spoke to people, and they rose up, and we gave them an opportunity to do this work in their union. And that's what they've continued to do, which is pretty incredible. We've also trained some other unions to do this work and invited them into this work. But each union is different, and not everybody and not every union is doing the same thing. But, this is what we wanted to be able to show you that is possible. It's one of the things that's possible. So right now we're expanding. And as you may know, in New York, ICE is very much more in the communities now. They have not come onto our campuses. We're still being diligent there. But we have solidarity groups on 15 of our college campuses so far. And we want to build that out. We're working with other groups, but I'll let Daniel talk more about the other groups and the other things that we're doing. But we will not cede ground in the courts. We will not give up that space. We will always fight for our students and their spaces. And we think right now that unions need to be in the lead. We need to be in the streets. We need to be organizing our members. And, in New York, we say New York is a union town. It's an expression we have. And part of that needs to be unions organizing to get their members out and do something or else, something other. And, last Friday when we all went out in solidarity for Minneapolis, it was the first time that I can remember when so many unions joined in one event, one mass event in the streets, along with community organizations and student groups and all kinds of community groups. And that was amazing. It wasn't just a unions demonstration, and it wasn't just community groups. It was all of us together in the streets. So thank you so much.
So Daniel, I want to just try to get you to do like 2 or 3 minutes. I'm sorry. I want to get to our legal speaker as well. And I've promised the over 1,000 people that are on that will be ending by 7:30. So I really, really, really appreciate all of this. And I'm sorry to just cut everybody. But I think what Andrea said was so important, and we have to pull all of this together. But so my apologies in advance, Daniel.
No, I definitely don't want to be the person standing between people and a lawyer to answer a question. So, but just
I had
it's
a
been great
sense
to listen
you wouldn't
to.
mind, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to join, even if it is super briefly. I will really share sort of 2 points
Great.
My name is Daniel Coates. I work with an organization called Make the Road New York. We're an immigrants' rights organization, do a ton of work across New York State, have 5 other Make the Roads across the country, and are in deep partnership with labor, other community organizations, and electeds. I just want to like underscore 2 things here. One is like the importance of action in building relationships. Like coordination, figuring out how it's going to happen doesn't happen by sitting around a table. It happens by doing things in the world. We've built in New York now a table called Hands Off New York, which is driving thousands and thousands of people into the streets, training hundreds every single week, and in building neighborhood groups across the entire city. That's because of the work like PSC and Andrea was leading in the courts, and on the streets that we have built. So I really just want to like urge people to get out there in any way, shape, or form in your place of work, in your home, and your building, etc. And I guess secondly, like I'm gonna underline the like being prepared. We work with so many people who are facing deportation every single day. The majority of our membership is undocumented, and having a small amount of a plan, having a whistle, being connected to a neighbor is extremely powerful, not only in the sense of having a way out and an option of who's going to run towards, who's going to run away from ICE, but also because of the peace of mind and the ability to go through life that gives folks. So anyway, just thank you and big kudos to everybody that's doing this work around the country. It feels like neighborism is sort of like becoming a philosophy, a political philosophy or something, and we are really proud to be a part of it. So thanks again.
So much, and I think neighborism is becoming a political philosophy. I think that is right, and I think the court work that Andrea was talking about, I know my wife has done some of that court work too. It's one of the very important things that people have been doing in New York. The solidarity rallies this week, as I said, I'm hearing that the vigil tomorrow night is going to be very big in New York. All of these things have been very, very important in terms of getting people to the street. And I want to announce that we are part of the next No Kings, which is going to be March 28th, getting people in the street that way in a unified way with so many different coalitions that are talking about how we don't want a king in this country. We've done that before, been there, done that, and we don't want the abuse of power that is happening right now. And so I hope that there will be millions of people on the street then. And we are also going to be doing our own action independent of all of that in terms of March 4th, bringing together all of education, pre-K through higher education, including students. We've just talked to the Sunrise students this week about doing things together on March 4th as well. So the point that you both made, and that was made before by our Oregonian speakers about being on the streets, is very, very important. It's the same point that Leah made as well as being prepared in this way. So Jonathan Blazer, who is Senior Policy Counsel at the ACLU, would you kind of take us home and then I'll turn it over to Evelyn to end and do a call to action. But would you, there's so much in terms of a legal and policy framework that you could probably talk for another probably 45 minutes or an hour. But why don't you just talk to us a little bit about what we need to try to do right now in terms of where we are with a legal framework.
Thank you very much, Randy. John Blazer with the ACLU. If you can put up the slides, please. I would love to take 3 minutes to go over some of the basic rights that we all hold, regardless of our citizenship or our immigration status, and regardless of the uniform the law enforcement officer is wearing. It's sometimes hard to tell whether you're dealing with a local police officer or an ICE official or a Border Patrol official. All of these rights are rights that we hold equally regardless of the uniform. We have the freedom of speech and the right to peacefully assemble. The word peacefully is in the Constitution, which means if our protests turn violent and we don't adhere to the principle of nonviolence, we're not protected in the same way by the Constitution. Very important to keep in mind. We have the right not to be detained or arrested without a valid reason, and we are seeing in action what it looks like, unfortunately, when our federal agents violate this right and when they question people without reasonable suspicion and when they arrest people without probable cause. There are lawsuits happening all across the country challenging these unlawful practices. We have the right to refuse to consent to searches of our body and our stuff and our homes. Law enforcement has some situations under which they don't need to obtain our consent, but anytime they seek to enter our homes to arrest somebody or to search somebody, they need to either get our consent or they need to get a warrant signed by a judge, and no ICE secret memo, or if they publish that memo, is going to change what the Constitution says about that. That's basic Fourth Amendment rights. We have the right to remain silent, the right to ask for a lawyer if we are detained or arrested, and we have a right to tell other people about their rights. We are exercising those rights on this call, and if you're in the street and see somebody who is being mistreated or at risk of having their rights violated, you have the right to tell them about their rights. Next slide. There's a lot of focus right now on whether we have the right to document and record the police. We do have the right to photograph or film anything that is plainly visible in public. Now, if you're on private property, the property owner gets to decide those rules, but anything plainly in public, we have the right to document so long as we are not trespassing or violating some other lawful order. Really important to keep a safe distance. Don't physically interfere with an officer. And I'll just note right here, and we're going to talk more about some of the risks. This is an area in which some law enforcement officers react very negatively and harshly, even though we have the right. And so it does involve some risks. People are being threatened, arrested, or worse for exercising this right. And you're going to have to assess your risk tolerance. Next slide. Some practices that can help reduce risks in inherently risky situations include the following: remaining calm, sometimes easier said than done, but very hard, very important to try. Avoiding sudden movements, keeping our hands visible, never resisting or obstructing or taking any action that could be interpreted as resisting or obstructing. Following orders when you can understand them, and if you don't understand them, ask for clarification. And importantly, if you're questioned or stopped and you're not sure what's going on and whether you're under arrest, you may ask if you're free to leave, and if the answer is yes, you may calmly walk away. And let me just end by asking you to join me. I know it, next slide. I know that it may feel a little bit silly because you're at home and maybe your spouse or your child is in the other room, but I'll just ask you to repeat after me, because if you forget what your rights are in a particular situation, here are 5 key phrases that can help us remember and exercise our rights no matter the situation that we are in. They connect to that first slide of constitutional rights for all. So repeat after me. And Randi, I'm going to ask you to be my guinea pig and you do the repeating.
Yep.
Am I free to go?
Am I free to go?
I wish to remain silent.
I wish to remain silent.
I do not consent to this search.
I do not consent to this search.
Am I under arrest?
Am I under arrest?
I want to speak to a lawyer.
I want to speak to a lawyer.
Thanks.
And
Thank
John,
you so much.
I think the point you've just made in terms of these need to be etched in, we need to put them on little placards, and they need to be etched in our brain, because the endorphins are going to be running around as, you know, ICE is around. But these are, as you just said, these are very, very special statements that under the law and under our Constitution are supposed to stop anyone. ICE still must abide by the Constitution. It pretends it doesn't have to, but it must. And so it just will be very, very helpful to remember those 5.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you, John. So I want to turn it over because, as I said, I know when we say it's an hour and a half, a lot of people have other things to do. I want to turn it over to my sister, Evelyn. I've learned a lot today, and I know a lot about all this. We had, as I said before, right before this, a meeting with our leaders, including Leah and Monica and Marcia from our siblings from Minnesota. And we are going to put together some of this training that's going to be available, not on a webinar like this, but it's going to be available in our offices and in different ways. That will happen as soon as we can pull all of it together. It's happening already in Minnesota. You saw some of the snippets that Kelly Booz put on the screen already. We are taking the position of ICE out of Minnesota, and that we are supporting the Democrats in the Senate who are trying to get curbs on ICE as part of the regular appropriation process right now. We are doing mutual aid as a union. We're putting up another one of the videos to really make sure that people know what is going on there. And please follow, if you want to, if you're on Blue Sky. I got off of Twitter, but follow me on Blue Sky or Threads or the AFT, and with up-to-date information. And I also do up-to-date information every Friday in a video. But there's a lot of things that we need to do. Number 1, stay in community. Number 2, support our neighbors. Number 3, know our rights and know the rights of our students and our patients. We know we're being tested here right now. And when we fight, we need to fight this oppression, and we need to fight this abuse of power. And we know that teachers and nurses and public employees already have so much to do. And this is just not only making education much, much, much harder, but we're talking about literally the abridgment of fundamental rights right now. And that's what we're fighting right now. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to my dear sister, Evelyn DeJesus.
Good afternoon, everyone. My friends, my union familia, as you have been hearing tonight for the last 90 minutes, our beloved country is at risk. Our most cherished values and rights are under assault by an increasing authoritarian, dangerous, unhinged, and lethal federal government. But this country was founded on the right to be free from the whims and cruelties of kings and tyrants. As we have also been hearing this evening, all over this country, from Portland to Chicago to Minneapolis, Americans are remembering who they are and organizing ourselves and our neighbors to defend the most vulnerable among us against the cruelty of this administration. We meet the guns and gas and pepper spray with nonviolence, with whistles and cell phones and organization. That's why hundreds of millions of Americans are seeing the cruelty up close, and why I believe the tide is turning. Now I want all of us to just stop for a minute, step back, and take a breath. We are in a crisis, and no one is coming to save us except us, that is. But we have the power of the people. All of us here stand on the shoulders of the previous generations who fought and sometimes died for the rights many of us used to take for granted. We must provide the shoulders for the next generation to stand on, because in the AFT, we care, we fight, we show up, and we definitely vote. As we close tonight, I want us all to remember the words of the great Latina organizer, Dolores Huerta. Here it is. Every moment is an organizing opportunity. Every person a potential activist. Every minute a chance to change the world. Let's say it together. Every moment is an organizing opportunity. Every person a potential activist. every minute a chance to change the world. Let's do it together. Let's go change the world. Good night.